Welcome back to another episode of the True Growth podcast. It is Latina Mata, your mindset coach and Revelation Breathwork facilitator, and of course the founder of True Growth Caribbean. And today on another episode of this podcast, we're going to talk about triggers. Now, of course, if you are taking me in via the YouTube channel, which is True Growth Caribbean, you would see that I am in a completely different space from my office. There is the sea in the background. You may hear some birds, you may hear some dogs, but I'm really trying to do something different to, make the experience of me podcasting be more interesting and fun. And of course, for those of you who actually listen or watch me on the YouTube channel, that you have some different ambience, right? So enjoy the scenery in the background. And those of you who are listening, of course, on all streaming platforms, you are also free to head over to the YouTube channel to take this video in via the vlog, right? So let's dive right into it. Today we're going to talk about triggers, guys, right? And one of the things about doing personal development, mindset work and inner work is that sometimes we have this expectation that we're not supposed to feel triggered. We're not supposed to have these emotional responses, we're not supposed to experience these quote-unquote negative emotions, and that is actually the furthest from the truth. Because we are humans, you are expected to have an extreme range of the emotional ways that are expected, because you're human, right? You're expected to have that, all the emotions that make up a human experience. So the goal is not for us to not have those experiences. The goal is for us to learn how to, one, manage those triggers and those emotions when we actually experience them, and then two, not stay in those, and I use the word low vibrational very loosely, not stay in those low vibrational spaces for extended period of time, right? So of course, I always have to bring a story, right, as to where and as to why I decided to touch on this in the podcast, right? One of the programs that I facilitate and that I help clients with is called Path to Purpose, right? And that is really specific to self-discovery, healing work, dealing with trauma, etc. And this is mandatory. This is part of the journey, is getting in really clear and in tune, right, with what's happening with you emotionally. So today I had an experience where I was waiting for a message, right? I was waiting for somebody to communicate with me and let me know that they were going to be here at a particular time, and they didn't, right? So a girl sitting down for about 2 hours just, existing, and I could feel the gears, like I could feel myself becoming so angry, so upset, right? And I'm like, why isn't this person communicating and just let me know what is happening? Now guess what, right? So when you are triggered, right, we usually operate from our trauma response, right? So that means we are either going to fight, flight, fawn, or freeze mode, right? One of those modes we operate in, and I guess depending on how intense the situation is and how severe the situation is, we may go between fight and flight, or from freeze to fawn, right? It depends. So your girl went into fight mode, essentially. Well, maybe it was a combination, right? And instead of me just communicate and say, hey, I just wanted to know what time you're coming because ABCD, your girl went into the whole have an attitude and just what is that, like just withdrawn and just pretty dismissive, right? And I could feel the rage all inside of my body. So usually, of course, when we're triggered, you don't usually get triggered in your mind, right? You get triggered in your body. And how do you know when you are triggered? It's because you would have all these sensations. You might have the beating heart rate, the sink in your stomach. You know that you're angry or you're upset or you're hurt or whatever. And you might be quick to fly off the handle, right? So in that moment, I am experiencing all of these sensations that suggest that I am triggered, right? Now, here's why I love taking baths, right? I know it sounds like I stray, but I'm not. I have a point. Something about taking a shower for me, and of course you can let me know in the comments, if that resonates too, right? When I take a bath, I usually get clarity, right? Like God speaks to me while I'm taking baths. So I went. So after I had my whole parade, right, and I was dismissive and I was rude and I was like, yeah, well, you message me when you get a minute because you don't know how to communicate. Meanwhile, clearly I don't know how to communicate either. Otherwise, I would have sent a message and just say what I actually wanted to say, right? So I was heading to the shower and I'm brushing my teeth, and I heard God say, "How are you going to expand your capacity and your bandwidth to be in uncomfortable situations if you do not manage how you respond?" That was the first thing he said. So I stopped, I brushed my teeth and I like this, and I paused and I'm like, And then he said, "How are you going to experience further and deeper feelings of connection if you do not allow yourself to be vulnerable?" So I was like, oh gosh, so this is where we're going with this. So I went into the shower and I'm taking this bath, and I could actually hear, I could process what happened, right? I could see that I was triggered, I could see that I was annoyed. And the first question that I had to ask myself was, listen, what is it that you actually wanted to see? Like what did that bring up for you? So this is me telling you, when you are triggered, you have the emotions, you want to fly off the handle, you want to withdraw, you want to probably go into, shutdown mode, whatever it is. And sometimes it happens so quickly that you don't even have time to do all of this, right? So even if you did have the experience, and so this is in your reflective moment, which we want to happen like soon after, I had to ask myself, okay, Latina, what it is you really needed? What is it you really wanted to say at that moment? And the truth is, what I really wanted to say was, hey, I would really love to see you, so please come visit me, right? That is all I really wanted to say. But of course, the ego, right? Our egos always like to make everything about us, and our egos always, like, humility is a big thing for ego, right? It always has this, and of course, we're trying to self-preserve, right? And of course, if you are in a triggered state, instead of you actually saying what it is you want to say, you would self-protect by going to fight, flight, whatever mode, right? So in order for me to self-preserve, I chose to fight, right? Instead of just being vulnerable and expressing what it is I really wanted to say. So I'm there in the shower, I'm taking the bath, and I'm like, okay, that is actually what I wanted to say. So that conversation would have gone very differently if I just message and say, hey, I've been looking out for a response from you, did not hear, I would really like to see you, so please come, right? Like, that is all I needed to say. But I couldn't, because in that moment, I was definitely triggered and my ego made it all about me. And then we went further, and I'm like, okay, why do I feel so triggered? Like, what about this is so triggering that made me choose to go into fight mode rather than, just expressing myself and be vulnerable? And I realized that it took me back to experiences many years ago that clearly has not been resolved, right? Or that I did not bring to my awareness. And so although this situation was very different, what it did for me at a nervous system level and at a subconscious level was mirror a time 5-7 years ago, 4 years ago. It mirrored that time. So I had to pause. So all this is happening while I'm taking the bath, and I had to literally, like, and when I had that revelation in the bathroom, I'm like, okay, so one, there was a fear of being vulnerable. Hence the reason I just, instead of just being vulnerable, I decided to lash out. 2, there was an actual trigger, as in there was a memory that came up in the past that had nothing to do with now, that I was reacting to as though it was 5 years ago, which isn't the case. And then 3, I had to pause and be like, okay, so what is it that I would have preferred to happen? So I did that whole replay in my mind. And of course, when I had the revelation, I was like I felt sad, like I felt like, oh my gosh, I felt the tears come up while I was in the bathroom, and I'm like taking this bath. I'm like, oh my gosh, this fear of vulnerability, right? Because you don't want to get hurt, and that's why we go into fight, flight, fawn, and freeze mode, is because we're not trying to get hurt, we're trying to protect, we're trying to self-preserve. So that fear of vulnerability is what would have allowed me to, instead of managing my emotions, just react in that trauma response space, right? So while I was there, so I'm going through the process. So I recognize what happened, I'm allowing the emotions to come up, I investigated where it came from, which was a past experience, and then I had to nurture myself. So while I'm there, I'm taking some deep breaths, and I'm just like, it's safe, Latina. It's safe. It's safe. Now, while I'm doing all of this, of course, there's still my ego. Her name is Shelly, right? So Shelly is like, sis, you really going to do this? You're really going to call back that person and apologize and take accountability and say what you really want to say and be vulnerable? And of course, the highest part of me was like, well, yes, because that is what future you want. That's what the highest part of you wants, and that only makes sense, right? That's what integrity looks like. And mind you, right? So you are actually you listening, right? You're one of the first people to hear about this story here, and it's not something that I would usually share, right? And I usually take a minute before I get to that point to like really acknowledge. It don't be so quick. It might be like a half hour, 20 minutes, or maybe when I see the person. But this time I was like, no, because while I could feel the discomfort from the vulnerability that I experienced while I was taking the shower and noticed what happened, I'm like, no, I'm going to call back now. So I called back and I said, hey, I'm sorry. What I really wanted to say was that I missed you and I wish that you came to visit. Yeah, I just felt really triggered because it brought up some past experiences, and I'm going to work on managing. Right now, as I said, while I'm saying this, guys, I'm having a whole somatic experience. Like my paws are raised, and I'm like, okay, God, I know something is happening here, right? Like I know something is happening. But what it did for me was totally make sense of what managing your triggers really look like. What that experience of stretching your capacity to deal with uncomfortable things, what that feels like. And of course, the vulnerability that comes when it is you do decide to be an adult and take radical responsibility for how you respond to certain things, right? So I'm saying all that to say that, one, triggers are normal, right? While you do this personal development work, you are expected to be triggered. The goal, however, is how you manage those triggers, one, and two, how long you stay triggered for. So because I processed that, I literally navigated something that may have taken me a longer period. I probably would have waited till the person calm. I'd have still been upset and annoyed and continue with that energy. Instead of doing that, it literally took a couple more months, and as soon as I did that and I allowed myself to realize what was happening, investigate where it came from, nurtured myself by reminding myself, what, I am safe, like this, I'm not in danger. And then of course I took radical responsibility. All of the negative sensations totally shifted and I felt new, as though I could continue, and when I should see them, greet them with love and happiness, right? So yeah, you are not expected to not have triggers, one, and two, you are not expected to, the goal, is for you to actually just manage how long you stay in that space of being triggered, right? And it requires some compassion, it requires self-awareness, it requires radical responsibility and accountability, and of course it requires that safety, that being in a container where you're able to express what's happening with you. So of course, if this is something that you know that you are having a hard time with because you consistently find yourself in your trauma response, to reach out. One of my programs called Paths to Purpose, that is something that we do heavily because it's really focused on your self-discovery, and self-discovery is not just about your likes and your dislikes and your strengths, which is of course part of it, but it really takes a deep dive into your emotional well-being, your emotional regulation, your emotional intelligence, how you navigate certain things based on your past experiences, and how you're going to take specific action steps to move forward. And of course, all of this boils down to what you do on a daily basis and how you navigate relationships and interactions as you go throughout your day. So as you're watching me here, so for those of you who are taking me in via video, you can tell that I am sweating, like I am warm. The sun is beating on my face. I think I look as though my eyes are closed, but trust me, they are open. But this is my first entry into my vlogcast, podcast episodes for a minute, and I'm so glad to have you. And of course, if you're listening to me all over the world, please send me a message. Be sure to tag me, guys, True Growth Caribbean on all social media platforms, and reach out to me if you are ready for coaching. cannot wait to talk to you soon. And of course, send me any questions if you have any. Love you guys. Bye. Mwah.